Hi, my name is Vinay Venkatraman, and I'm trained as a designer, but I love dabbling with design, technology, and science. So today I'm going to talk about how big data can actually drive innovation and how we can bridge the world of design and technology together to create radically new solutions for people and society. So this is a little anecdote from the 50s. This enormous thing that's being loaded onto an aircraft was actually a hard drive that was developed by IBM. And this was big data back in the 50s. It actually could have a capacity of 5 megabytes. This was phenomenal at that point of time. But today, this has very little relevance. So there's a report that was generated by Tech America Foundation a couple of years ago where there were estimates about how much data is being produced today. And these are enormous figures. There's apparently in 2011 about 1.8 zettabytes of information was created globally. And this is growing exponentially. That equals to almost 200 billion 2-hour high-definition movies that a person could watch for almost 47 million years. This is a staggering figure. This is a huge amount of data. But the real question is, what does this data give us, and how can we really use this to improve our own lives, but also help the planet? So the term big data is sort of an interesting catchphrase that's evolved, but it's basically defined by very large volumes of data, very high velocities of data, and huge amounts of variation in the data set. So this requires a completely different kind of approach to handling all this information. And how do you harness this and build things on top of it becomes a real key question. In essence, today, big data composes of sort of two elements, which is structured data and unstructured data. The thing about structured data is that it's pre-organized, it's built into relationship models, and it's available as a machine-readable system. This only consists of about 15% of the amount of data being produced today. The other 85% is more or less unstructured data. That is the kind of stuff that comes out of your Twitter feeds, from your Facebook accounts, from your emails, from YouTube videos, and whatnot. So there is an enormous amount of unstructured data that's available today, but we are yet at the very tip of this iceberg to understand how to really use it for bigger value than delivering insights that could drive new business. So today, in the current paradigm, there are three different sort of strategies or tracks in which people use big data sets. So one of them is about making decisions. So it's really about status and sort of use large data sets and clever algorithms and a lot of good math in order to make decisions about businesses. The other track is really about recognizing patterns. And pattern recognition is a very interesting value that is usually built out of historic data. So you look at several years or months worth of data, and then you start recognizing patterns and trends in that. And this is also very, very useful. But then the third paradigm that's being used today is about forecasting. Really amazing algorithms, really clever people, and deep science all come together to create forecasting models based on very large data sets. And this is a very interesting space too, because there is a lot of human-generated data, but also there are data that's coming out of simulations and algorithms and sort of using different other models to generate the data. So this actually helps you forecast a little bit and sort of make predictive or preemptive decisions about how to shape things in the future. But the paradigm that I would like to address today is adding a co-creation model on top of it, which is really the design paradigm. It's about bringing all these values of data, clever analytics, decision-making, dashboarding, and all those kinds of solutions, and combining them with humanistic values to bring it down to normal people, to allow people to harness all this potential and make good use of it for their own betterment and the betterment of society. So when it comes down to dashboards and visual representation, there's a lot of solutions out there which allow you to represent large amounts of data in some kind of a nice visual solution where there are key indicators and matrices that are displayed. And this is a common paradigm today. But this is clearly not enough, because just-in-time decision making is not enough today for the business paradigm we are in. So the next thing that we want to do is recognize patterns. So this is an example that we did for Maersk Line, which is one of the largest container shipping businesses in the world, where we took 1 year's worth of historic data and we actually animated it in such a way that you can start seeing patterns of how traffic flows across the world. This is deeply insightful because it shows you where the bottlenecks are, it shows you how vessels actually move, it shows you an interesting history of 1 year, and it's visual. The visual recognition capability of people is so much more than looking at numbers and charts that are loaded with numbers. So visual recognition and pattern recognition is one of the key tools that is supremely important for large data sets. Forecasting becomes the next sort of paradigm. And this is a great example of a police department in Tennessee, in Memphis, where they actually have worked with IBM and other vendors to create a very interesting solution of reducing crime rate by almost 15% by using very large data sets and using them to actually optimize their crime-solving processes. So basically, better organization of the police force, better management of the fleet, better management of resources, and all this is predictive or forecasting models that are applied on this. This is a very interesting space to be in, for sure. But then the real question that we should ask ourselves is, how do we move from problem solving to opportunity seeking? Because it's not just enough today to solve existing problems. We have to be opportunistic. We have to sort of go that extra mile and create opportunities where none existed before. And the other thing that big data is often thought about as a model for justifying decisions. Dashboards are typically examples of how you consolidate large amounts of data and then you justify your decisions. But that's not enough. We need to understand and get deep insight. And getting deep insight is not just about using data. It's really about understanding people, it's about understanding behavior and society. So all this put together gives us a new paradigm which is all about opportunity seeking, gathering deep insight, and developing new solutions. And existing solutions can be modified and evolved into a new space. So from my paradigm, I would like to understand how we can do something more interesting with all these large data sets. So it's really about storytelling, which is a very interesting value proposition. So how do you tell brilliant stories with very large data sets? Because eventually the thing that people remember is the story, not the figures. Sense making, that's the other interesting challenge. Today we are surrounded by an abundance of different kinds of sensors, different kinds of technology which can actually throw out huge amounts of data. But how do we use it? And how do we create interesting solutions for that? And then there is the design and data mashups. So how do you combine the two and create something really interesting? A word about complexity. Complexity and data go hand in hand. Today, there is no escape from complexity. In today's world, the amount of data we are seeing is like an enormous supermarket. But the thing is that you never get this bird's eye view. What you get is typically a view of the aisle, or more often than not, a keyhole view of the same data set. So the real question becomes, how do we harness all this and cope with all this complexity? Because complexity isn't going to disappear from our lives. What's going to happen is that we are only going to strive for simplicity. So the thing that I would like to propose is that we'll better learn how to manage complexity in a more elegant way. So in that space, there's a lot of work that's going on in sort of the quantified self, or expressing yourself and your life in data. There's lots of amazing products like the Fitbit or the Nike Fuel Band, which have actually hit the market today, which generates enormous amounts of data about yourself. How do we use all this becomes a really interesting question. The Internet of Things, it's another paradigm where almost every device today is becoming intelligent. It has sensors, it has capabilities of creating data. Everything has an IP address. So this means they're addressable and they're harnessable. So how do we combine these two things and create value for ourselves? The other trend is crowdsourcing. There's enormous amounts of people out there with smartphones and devices. This is a great example of noise level calculations that are done globally by crowdsourcing through this website called White Noise. And it's really fascinating that a little app can actually gather so much data across the world, and you can do really interesting models around this. This was a fascinating example again of a DIY sort of data input technique where after the Fukushima sort of disaster, a lot of hobbyists and enthusiasts got together and they created different kinds of hackable radiation sensors. And they have actually created a wide net of data that is really, really usable by public and sometimes surpasses even what government or official data sets can actually offer. Gamification is another trend. This is a very fascinating big data set game which is about understanding protein structures, and it's designed as a game so that people can contribute in small ways and actually deliver a unique solution of unfolding large protein structures in order to create new pharmaceutical or new medical solutions. Generative artifacts is another interesting trend where actually data is being used to create products from scratch, where people can customize and people can actually manipulate and modify data so that it suits their living conditions. This is a very interesting example of a Spanish company which actually makes generative furniture with data. But then the most powerful element of all this is storytelling with data. So here's an example of an amazing data set that's come out of Germany on cancer. There's an organization which collects large amounts of data on cancer patients, and Oliver Zimmer, he actually created visualizations out of these things. This is a fascinating example of how visualization can go a long way in storytelling. So that data today is available as structured tables, but this does not make so much sense because you really have to decipher this in a different way. This does not make a story in your mind. So the real question is, how do you transform this into a visualization? So this is the power of design, really. And here's a little interesting snippet of how the same data is represented in a visual format where you can start seeing trends and patterns. So for example, on the left axis is the age group. On the right axis, extreme right, is the number of incidences and the number of deaths of cancer. In between, on the columns, are male and female, and then the localization of different kinds of cancers. So you can start seeing patterns in this. So what's really fascinating to see here is that women mostly, of course, get affected by breast cancer, but then there's also a very high chance of survival. The thing that actually affects women most in a very serious way that causes death is bowel cancer and other forms of cancer. So if you look at the men, it's really fascinating that prostate cancer is one of the leading incidences of cancer, but again, the survival rates are much higher. But lung cancer, even though has a smaller incidence level, actually causes more number of deaths. So you can actually start seeing different kinds of patterns, and the most deaths today in Germany are caused by a combination of lung cancer and bowel cancer, both for men and women. So it's a matter of priorities, and it's a matter of understanding how to take research forward in order to create these kinds of solutions. So pattern recognition, storytelling, and delivering unique solutions becomes a paradigm that design can actually bring to large data sets. It creates new innovation space. It allows companies to transform their strategies, allows them to rethink their business models often, and create really unique solutions that are of genuine value to the end users. So to bring together all these different values of creativity, innovation, design, big data, and science, we are creating the Big Data Visualization Academy in collaboration with the Danish Design Center and the Aarhus and Copenhagen communes. So the thing that we're going to do there is that we're going to learn how to gather data, cook data, serve data, and eventually how to consume data. All this packaged in a format of great visualization skills and exploring holistic solutions that will actually create meaning for society in new ways. So we are hoping to bring together science, data, and design on the same platform and create a whole new paradigm of skills and a different way of approaching large data sets that will create meaningful new solutions for everyday life, for our own benefit and for the benefit of greater society. Thank you so much.